Alrighty, everybody. Good Wednesday evening to you. How in the heck is everybody doing tonight? This is me, your humble, handsome, happy host, Bill Sylvie, currently waiting on co-host Kyle Schuant to enter the studio. So he'll be along. Excuse me, went puberty on you guys there. Sorry. He'll be along momentarily. And we're going to have lots of fun stuff to discuss tonight, because we always do. We always have a good time with the awesome Kyle Schuant. I see your connection, Kyle. You're looking a little green. Is this some new green screen trick? Just waiting on him to get his connection connected. Just to check in to see what condition his connection was in. But how about you guys out there in YouTube land while we're waiting for Kyle? How is our vast studio audience doing today? I hope you're all well. Because I'm doing great. I'm doing wonderful. Lay off the hormones. Very funny. Very funny. When last night's guest returns as an audience member. Well, last night, yesterday afternoons. But anyway, so just as quick as Kyle gets his camera set up, we'll get rolling. Hey, there he is. Ladies and gentlemen, gamer, raconteur, and head of the philosophy department at the University of Woolloomooloo, Australia. Let's get a round of applause going for Mr. Kyle Schuant.
Cheers, guys.
Kyle, how the hell are you?
Oh, not too bad. Not too bad.
Excellent. Excellent.
Sitting here in my high-tech studio with my obviously high-tech
Yes. See, I can only get mad at...
wasn't what I...
Now, go ahead, man.
It was much simpler in like the old Alien movies and...
Yeah. Then it was just, push a button. See, I can only pretend to get mad about things and throw things at the screen. Kyle has actual things he can throw in his gym. If his laptop pisses him off, he's got like 100-pound, 52 kilogram weights behind him.
I knew a guy in the army who he had some sort of a conception that this is like back in the 90s. I will get a computer and learn how to use it, and then I'll be able to do something when I leave the army. And so he got a computer and put it in his room in the barracks. And one night we just heard this massive amount of swearing and a window opening and then a heave and a followed by a crash.
Oh no.
He cracked the shits with the thing and heaved it out his window. And we're on the first floor, so it was, it went down about 15 feet or something. It was enough to, because the old cathode ray tube and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know what his future career was. I don't know what he did after he left the army, but probably wasn't something in IT, I'm guessing.
I don't know. That sounds like a lot of sysadmins that I've known over the years. That might actually work. And God knows I've wanted to destroy a few. Back in the mid-90s, I worked for an electronic finance company, and I was responsible for mothering in an old piece of DOS software when everybody was switching to Windows NT 4, to Windows 98, and to Windows 2000. There was this piece of communication software that only ran under DOS. It could only run under DOS. And banks, when they say, yeah, we want to use the HydroNet system to get our daily reports, I'd be like, you need a DOS PC. And they would throw a fit, but then they'd go out and they'd waste the money to scrape together a DOS PC. Well, we found out, much to our ire, that because of the way the COM ports, that is what talks to a printer and a modem on old computers back from 20, 30 years ago, the COM ports on the HP Vectra VL line of desktop PCs would not work with the HydroNet software that we sent, which was this modem thing that connected to our banking computers and sent account reports to these institutions. So, of course, every other bank had gone out and bought brand new shining HP Vectra VLs for their IT departments because they were nice and cheap. So it was always a lot of fun to get on the phone with these poor IT guys at other banks and say, yeah, you're going to have to budget another PC, buddy, and it can't be an HP. But we've got a bulk deal with HP. Yeah, you can't. And I myself, I wanted to go and I wanted to throw fucking HP Vectors in the trash. In fact, about 8 years ago, 7 or 8 years ago, my mom's church shuttered, and they basically said, hey, look, we're selling off the land and everything, and some of our portable classrooms on the school campus, one of them is just full top to bottom, front door to back, with PCs that have accumulated over the decades. Do you want to come and get first pick because they're all going into a dumpster? And I said, they're not going into a dumpster on my watch. So I went, and most of them were, pretty much scrap. Although there's been a resurgence in vintage, and by vintage I mean 1990s era gaming. Today, I kind of wish I had just U-hauled them out and warehoused them. I could sell them off to people who want to play like Windows 2000 and Windows XP era games. But anyway, so I go and I'm going through computers and I'm erasing the hard drives like they asked me to. And I get to the bottom of one stack, and what's there but an HP Vectra VL. I took that thing outside and I ran over it with my car. I have never been so happy to destroy a piece of technology as I was that day. Just fucking HP Vectra VLs. Anyway, so that ends your IT jokes for the day.
Well, I think everyone in every job has got a piece of equipment that we hate. In the Australian Army, the Ostire rifle, piece of junk.
You told me about that.
Well, Pat and I were both in, and not together. Many years apart. He's younger than me. But he, Pat that I played DayZ with, and we were reading that the next update of DayZ is going to include the Steyr, and we both sworn not to use it, even if it means we're swarmed by zombies or killed by a dozen other players. We're not going to use that piece of shit.
I would. Yeah.
It won't be realistic because it will actually fire reliably and usefully and won't fall apart.
I think now, I never stood the watch. I've never, the heaviest gun I've ever handled is a shotgun. But I think it speaks volumes that in the movie Remo Williams' The Adventure Begins, which was supposed to be the start of a franchise series of movies in the mid-1980s about the Destroyer pulp novels. The bad guys that Remo was sent to take down were crooked military contractors. And the movie starts off with U.S. troops with a new battle rifle. And one blows up in a soldier's hand and kills him. And, that sort of kicks it off. But these new battle rifles were Steyr AUGs with heavy flash suppressor extensions on the end. Mm-hmm. So there's your. I think there's the proof positive. Even the makers of this action movie knew that they were garbage. Didn't the Australian military like hang the bill for the destruction of one on you?
Yes, they did. So the procurement process, I am told, take part in it, so I don't know. But, it's just one of these stories you hear, was that, so we had the old SLRs, which were the Belgian FN FAL, which is an AK-47 kind of rifle. I mean, it's designed differently in that, but I mean, it's a 7.62, big-ass metal barrel, big-ass metal action.
Right.
It's got a big wooden stock. You get clocked across the head with that, you know about it. Those were those were good and reliable rifles. The issues with them were, I felt, two. One was they were a bit overpowered for what we needed, because Australian forces usually go into either urban areas or jungle kind of thing. That's what's in our neighbourhood. When we went to Timor, it was urban and jungle. If we helped out PNG, it would be mostly jungle, but some urban and so on. You don't really need a rifle with an effective fire of 600 meters for that. That was really great in the Falklands with the Argentinians, both the Argentinians and the British had it, because there's nothing. There's one tree on the island or something. It's just these frozen moors, Yeah. So it was great there, 600. But you don't see the guy 600 meters away. You don't see the guy 60 meters away if it's urban or jungle. So you don't need one that's that powered. So I felt like a carbine version, perhaps with a folding stock or something, could have been better in that regard. So that was the difficulty. They're a bit overpowered for what Australian soldiers tend to do. The second issue was that the individual rifles were 30 or so years old, and guys who've been in will know whenever you hand in gear to the Q sergeant, he goes over it and it has to be shiny and spotless. The problem is that if you clean a firearm to shiny and spotless every time it's used, it actually wears down the bolt. And it's not enough that you would notice. It's not going to affect, I take the weapon out today and fire and hand it back in, and then next weekend I do it again, and oh no, it's got stoppages. That's not going to be it. But when it happens over 30 years, the individual weapons were worn down and were getting stoppages and stuff, and occasionally going runaway and things like that. So we needed a new batch and to be carbines. That's what I felt we needed. Obviously, different units would have different needs and so on, but that's the general thing. Anyway, so they looked at all that, and they had a few candidate rifles, and there was the Steyr and the M16, and I think there was a Galil in there. There's a few candidate rifles. An Army, Navy, and Air Force each had trial teams that took them out on exercise and live fire exercise down the range and all the rest, and then made their recommendation. Steyr came dead last for all three teams. But Steyr was the only company that would give Australia a license to produce it domestically. The Americans no, look, we'll just produce them, we'll send them to you, and everyone else. No. But yes, Steyr was the only one who would give them a license to produce it domestically. So the Australian defence industries could produce it here in Bendigo and so on in Victoria. So they did that, which was funny because a few years later they sold Australian defence industries to France anyway. But the job stayed here. So. Yes, so the firearm has a number of issues, chief of which is safety. So it has a bullpup design. So normally you have your magazine and you have your action behind it. So the action goes forward, it pushes around off the top of the magazine and into the chamber. And then you pull the trigger and it hits the firing pin, which is in the bolt, and hits it, boom, and then the gas from that explosion pushes the bolt back, ejecting the spent round, the brass off to the side that gives you that sensation. And then there's a spring in the butt that pushes it forward. That was how the old SLR worked. Well, they figured if they could arrange it that the magazine sat behind the action, then the weapon could be shorter overall, because the effective range of the weapon is determined in part by the barrel. A longer barrel gives a steadier fight. That's why your pistol with a barrel that long can't really hit something 800 yards away.
Right.
But your rifle with a barrel that long can. The longer barrel, the more stable the flight's going to be.
Sure.
So they went, like, we could have an equal length barrel with an overall shorter weapon. The problem was that this made it a bit more complicated to use, and complicated to pull apart and put back together. It had more moving parts that way. Mm-hmm. As well, it was less reliable. You get more stoppages and so on. Then they decided, okay, we need it to be lighter, so we'll make it out of plastic instead of metal and wood. Yeah, so the only metal is the barrel and the action. All the rest is plastic, hard plastic. But of course, most plastic, the plastic that's really got good strength against a bash doesn't have much, is pretty heavy. So they use the lighter one that gets bashed around more. As well, plastic, unlike metal and wood, has to be, if you put plastic things together, it has to be with greater tolerances. That's why there's more gap between the keys on your keyboard than there would be if it was all metal or wood or something. It doesn't slide against each other. Like the wood of these drawers, there's less of a gap than there is between your keys on the keyboard and stuff, because it's all plastic.
Right.
So it needs a greater tolerance, a greater space. So that means your safety catch and all that is rattling around. As well, because the action was in front of the magazine, they had to have the safety catch. Instead of being the old normal lever, they put the safety catch across the body of the weapon. So you can bump it and it comes off safe. Nice. You have the safety catch rattling around in there.
Nice.
Well, the Austrians had made it because for a long time, I'm told, their doctrine was basically, because they were neutral during the Cold War, in case of invasion from the Warsaw Pact, or less likely from NATO, like to get into West Germany by way of Austria, go the southern route. We'll just pull back from the Viennese plain and up into the Alps and harass their, because there's no way they could defend it against the Warsaw Pact or whatever.
Right.
So they just pull back into the Alps and then harass them and stop them just, marching off into Italy. So that was their plan. So they expected to be fighting in the mountains, in the snow. Now, historically, a lot of firearms have had a removable trigger guard for this reason, because you might have mittens on. They decided, we just won't have a trigger guard. So it has a little hilt. It's like one of those 18th century swords. There's a hilt with a thing around it, like that. Jeez. So it means when you're walking along, you have to kind of have your finger up. Otherwise, you're resting your finger on the trigger, which is, generally not considered safe.
Right.
So you have to have your finger up like that, and you have that around. Now, because it's all plastic and all the rest, not great tolerance, it was really hard to zero the weapon. You lost the zero. So for those who don't know firearms, zeroing is the process where you go down on the range. Now, you might naturally fire high and to the right. You can try to correct that. And when you're on the range, you can do that. I'll just fire low and to the left and it'll balance out and come right. But if you get into an actual firefight, you're not going to remember all that. Right. You're just going to fire directly at the enemy. So what you do instead is you adjust. So if your tendency is to fire high and to the right, you adjust your weapon so that it fires low and to the left. And then it balances out. And that weapon, serial number 612347 or whatever, is your weapon. It's adjusted for you. Because there'll be variations, someone's got slightly longer arms or slightly better vision, whatever, there'll be those variations.
It's like in your car, you adjust your seat, It's like,
yeah,
you
exactly.
set your seat so your feet are comfy on the pedals, you don't have to screw with the mirror too much, your back feels good.
Yeah, but so it's plastic, so that all falls apart. The zeroing didn't work. So the next thing was to add a sight to it, an optical sight. And they said, if we have like a 4 times optical sight, the guys will go and they'll take a moment to adjust their vision. And they said, well, we don't really want that anyway, because the problem was that the guys zeroing the weapons, going down the range, and then the next day they'd go down again and they'd be missing. That wasn't working. So what they did was put a 1.5 times sight on. It was just enough that they could get the recruits to pass the marksmanship standard.
Oh my God.
with less rounds. Instead of taking 500 rounds or whatever to get it, they got it in 100 rounds. And they went, great, we saved lots of money that way. So they did that.
Jesus.
The first batch of styles that came through, there was something about the plastic formula. The mosquito repellent that we had in our ration packs dissolved the plastic. So the guys would put the mozzie repellent on themselves and then hold their rifle, and there start to be little strange grooves appearing in the plastic.
Oh, jeez. Well, that's one way to custom fit a rifle. Just squirt some mosquito juice on it and squeeze your hands, and then, you got a perfect fit.
Yeah, and they made it, so then they changed the plastic formula so that wouldn't happen. But they also made the thing in basically 2 big pieces that they welded together, like a lot of plastic toys do.
Right, sonic welding.
The seam along them wasn't really tough. And so that's where we get that incident that you mentioned. So I chucked my rifle into the back of a Unimog and split along the length. So they charged me $1,500 for it. So,
Jesus.
Which I was very indignant when I found out they'd only paid $400 or something, but it was about a month's pay for me then. It's like back in the 90s.
That's nuts.
So, yeah, it's split along the way. So it's a piece of junk. It's unreliable. Until Afghanistan, the Steyr had killed more Australian soldiers than any enemy had. So, like apparently at Timor, they're in a truck and someone's rifle went off accidentally, and the round bounced around inside the truck, and that it must have been off the frame. Surely it couldn't have bounced off the canvas. But anyway, off the frame or whatever, and struck some poor bastard, killed him.
God.
It went off accidentally. So
government inaction.
It's yes, it's a piece of shit. We don't want. In the end, you will still poke a hole in somebody and make him leak. So you'll do that, but
well, it's like for reasons that we do actually talk about role-playing games on the show, guys, I promise. For reasons that elude me, probably it feeds into the whole idea of bitter non-gamers and that sort of thing. If you go over to the one forum on the internet, and I can't remember the URL, it's not something easy to remember, you can Google it and find it, but there's one big clearinghouse forum for discussion about Twilight 2000. And there's 2 groups of people, there's 2 factions in there when it comes to how does the post-apocalypse unfold. Half of them think that it's like The Road, the film, the Road, where there's an indistinct, rapturous level event, and I don't mean that in a good way. Not like everybody, just it is beyond. The Road is post-apocalypse. Like post-apocalypse is, okay, the disasters happen and there's rebuild. The Road is post-apocalypse because the attempts to rebuild have fallen completely apart by the time we join the 2 main characters in The Road. And then there's another half that's like, no, things will be bad, but we'll start, we'll pull ourselves up and we'll start building up. Well, B group is of the mind that the U.S. Army, at least in the United States, to repel Cubans and Cuban-backed Mexicans trying to take Texas and New Mexico and Arizona and Southern California back for a new Mexico, they would go to all of these museums. So we have a lot of privately owned armored vehicles in museums. You see them up on blocks and on, traffic circles, depending on what town you're in, that sort of thing. You could probably outfit a battalion or two of armor, maybe even a whole division, I don't know, just of display tanks. But it runs the gamut from M22 Locust, which is a failed, not very successful light tank from the Second World War, all the way up to M60 A3s in front of the local VFW. And that line is very clearly defined because there are people, the people from Group A who are like, no, this is like the road. Everything is just slowly decaying into absolute awfulness, are like, well, what good is a Sherman tank going to do? To which I say, and I guess for the sake of the argument, it puts me in Camp B of the Twilight 2000 group. I don't care if it's a 1917 era French FT. If I have a tank and you have no tank, I have the best tank. By default, I have the best tank and therefore I win. So what if it won't shrug off an anti-tank weapon? You have no anti-tank weapons. You've got a bunch of rednecks with 308s and shotguns and 45s and Glocks. I have an admittedly thinly armored, but armored nonetheless, all-terrain tracked vehicle with a 30mm cannon that can shoot through the sandbags and concrete you put up around your ranch house in rural Florida. So I win the argument. So in that respect, as you say, the AUG will put a hole in somebody. But if something better comes along in your Twilight 2000 scenario, yes, then the Sherman is bad news. Kyle's teleported away, so when he gets back, we'll talk about other gaming stuff too. My tank is bigger than your no tank. Exactly. My tank is bigger than your no tank. It's like in D&D, It's like walking around in your all together.
Back in a tick, Bill.
I'm sorry?
I'll be back in a tick.
All right, sure. No problems. So Kyle will be joining us back here in just a minute. We're kind of easygoing. We're sort of laid back here. We can understand that. But with that said, Twilight 2000, it's a good game. I'm not crazy about the new Twilight 2000. Come on, man. Don't politics it up, please. I beg of you. Don't politics it up. But Damien says, I have a tank and a flag. Your argument is invalid. Exactly. There was a guy in, and I say was, his name was Jacques Littlefield, and he was one of the founders of Oracle, along with Larry Page. And he was a multi-billionaire, because Oracle, of course, was a huge computer software company. And Mr. Littlefield turned his billions of dollars and his hobby, his passion for armored vehicles into a museum. Well, it started out as a collection, but Jacques Littlefield, from the late 1980s, early 1990s, until he passed away in the early mid-2000s, purchased easily, I think at last count he had something like 48 former military vehicles, and they were it was alternately called the Military Vehicle Technology Museum, Military Vehicle Technology, but he had quite the collection, and a bunch of Cold War stuff that, of course, wouldn't really be available until the end of the Cold War. Suddenly you're not a client vassal state of the Soviet Union. you don't have to worry about being put on the pointy end of the spear and forced into battle by the USSR behind you. You know, you're Bulgaria, you've got a crap load of T-62s and T-55s. What do you do with them? Well, if you can sell them for 100,000 each and maybe buy something a little bit more modern, you go that route. So Mr. Littlefield filled his collection with ex-Soviet and ex-NATO vehicles that client states would sell. I think the only thing he didn't have in his collection at the time of his passing was any mark of M1 Abrams. A lot of the tech in Abrams tanks is still considered classified. So that was something that would come up in Twilight 2000 terms. Is like, okay, what if you had a collector in the Twilight 2000 universe on the level of Jacques Littlefield? Because he had a machine shop. This wasn't just, you know, okay, I bought these vehicles, they brought them up by tractor, and they set them off in a meadow, and people could mill around them. They were runners, and he had some interesting specimens. He had a working KWK 8.8 centimeter cannon. No ammo for it. But the breech wasn't welded shut. It wasn't cut. I guess he paid the massive ATF taxes to own a destructive device. But it was made before the Firearms Act. So, you know, he was legally allowed to own it. Most of those display tanks have inoperable weapons. That is correct. IR is correct. Most of the tanks you see up on blocks and so on display do have inoperable weapons. But, again, if you're talking about using something as a mobile pillbox, strapping a few extra machine guns on, and even firing something out the tube, using the tube as a recoilless rifle launcher, or a recoilless round launcher, basically just homegrown rockets, you know, with your own homegrown breech block,
or perhaps as a deterrent effect.
Exactly. You know, no.
It's like if somebody points a rifle at you, do you stop to check it's loaded?
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, it's.
And if somebody points a 115 millimeter tank cannon at you,
you're not going to go.
Yeah,
I bet that tank's. Yeah, I bet that tank's from the VFW, and your breech block is cut. How much do you want to put on that bet? Exactly how much?
Well, always remember the Killdozer. He had no weapons on that at all. He just ran things over.
Yeah, he just ran things over. I mean, you know, if you've gone all Lord Humongous and, you know, you've got your band of wild boys, and here comes a guy in an M60, you know, they've still got the coax, they've still got the gun on the loader's hatch, and they've still, you know, the commander still has a Coppola 50 cal. Okay, go get him, guys. No.
I was watching a stream of an Arma 3 game last night.
Yeah.
And there was a bit of friendly fire in the form of a striker driver kept accidentally running over his own infantry.
Oops. Squish.
Yeah, so I just wanted to mention the Killdozer, you know.
Yes, no, Killdozer.
You're in that setting, like, yeah, any weapon is a good weapon. It's just that some weapons are a lot better than others.
Yes, and Killdozer is a fine example. So, but moving right along, gaming news. We have actual gaming news. Well, I think this. We can do that. We can talk about on-topic stuff too. Except on-topic is at this point off-topic. Apparently the CEO of Hasbro passed away. He saw
that. He was only 58. What took him out?
It was cancer. Apparently he had I'm not sure what the term would be. Basically, he had family that had the same sort of cancer, and it kind of got passed on. So
nasty stuff.
Yeah. Now we can make jokes about, has been, Hasbro, hazards, Hasbro D&D, but I don't. I don't really joke around about that kind of thing. I'm sort of entering that age myself when I got to go see Dr. Jellyfinger once a year. So,
I think of that. What's his name? David Wong or something. The guy who wrote the Monkey Sphere article, and talking about how different primates, they've got different size social groups, because there's only so many people who you can stay in touch with and remember the relationships between and so on. There's only so much of a social circle you can keep going, and so if you've got a little monkey brain, it's a small troop of 10 or 12 or something, but humans with our big monkey brains, it's about 150. A bit bigger, more for some, bit fewer for less, but around about that number.
Right.
Anyway, this guy's article on crack.com, one of the best articles that they ever produced, I think, he was saying essentially the monkey sphere is why 20,000 people die in Iran in an earthquake, and we go, that's not nice, and turn the page. But a boy falls down a well in our town, and the whole state's glued to the television for the next 24 hours until they pull him out, because one person is human and 20,000 aren't, and he's more relatably us than people in some foreign country and so on. And he also explained it as that's why when you're driving, you swear a lot at other drivers, but if you get in a lift or elevator, as you guys call it, and somebody presses the wrong button, you don't lean over and scream at them, "Learn to use the lift properly, you bastard!"
No matter how much we may want to.
Yes. So anyway, and his comment in passing, one of them was, this is why, he says, the little old guy making children's wooden toys in his basement is, to us, a wonderful, decent, kind guy, but a large game company that's given that sort of joy to hundreds of thousands of children is an evil corporate entity.
Yes. The death of one man is a tragedy. The death of 20 million is a statistic. Joseph Stalin.
So I think anyone might have critiques of quite valid critiques of how Hasbro runs its business, and certainly of how Wizards of the Coast runs its business, owned by Hasbro, for those who don't know. There's plenty of valid critiques out there, but in the end, they are, or most of them are, people who make their living by producing games for other people, and those games that give people a lot of joy. So they are people that can give a lot of joy. Now, I don't know anything about this guy. I'd never heard anything about him until he died. Didn't know a damn thing about it. Just, I saw this picture and I thought, that's a Tucker Carlson looking guy, or a John Kerry looking guy. There's a certain kind of guy that you get in America. He has a sort of an oblong head and this coiffured hair, and that's a sort of, and they're kind of lantern-jawed usually as well. And a certain look, you don't get that kind of look of guy in Russia or England or Africa or whatever. It's just this certain look of the American guy, and he's 50-something, and he wears a suit and he has this oblong head and coiffured hair and all the rest. That's what I thought. It's another guy like that. And then I turned the page because I'd never heard of him before in my life. But his company has helped give joy to a lot of people, as much as we like to rubbish Wizards of the Coast and all the rest.
True. I mean, and to the phenotype, I say eventually mutts become their own breed. Eventually mutts become their own breed. That's all I can say about how different Americans tend to look from the Eastern European phenotype, the Central Western English, Anglo-Saxon. We're just kind of mutts, and we become our own breed. But yeah, it's so, we hardly knew ye, sir. Thank you for not turning Dungeons and Dragons into a line of T-shirts and hats. But something a little bit closer to home. I found this funny. So a couple of months ago, I filled out. There's two kinds of contests I'll enter. One where I know it's a fait accompli and it's just like everybody going to get a prize, And the other is like if some insane lottery amount comes up to like $1.1 billion, it's gotten that high before, and I'll give me like 5 Powerball quick picks. Just the computer chooses the numbers. It's got just as much a chance as hitting the 6 lottery numbers as I do picking them myself. So, I'll do that just for the hell of it, just for a larf, because hey, who knows? But I did enter one of the everybody gets a prize things, and it was for 3D minis, or 3D printed minis. Like the grand prize was this big huge expensive resin 3D printer. And then there were different tiers. Well, I got mine today, and it was one 3D file. I can go in to this company and I can custom design one miniature, and they'll send me the 3D file, and I can print it myself if I want. So I'm going to do, I figure I'll do that. I mean, I'm not spurning it. I'm not like, big deal. So what? Believe me, it's nice. It's like getting a little toy car in the bottom of the box of cereal. Although they do yell at me at the grocery to please stop dumping the cereal out on the floor. That's something. Why did we, okay, with all the weight TSR had behind them in the 80s and pop culture, Kyle, why did we never get a Dungeons and Dragons cereal? Little plastic monster minis in there.
Yeah, little plastic. So they don't do that anymore. They don't get little plastic toys in the cereal anymore. Wonder what happened.
I have no, I don't know, choking hazard maybe. I have no idea.
Because you guys don't get Kinder Surprise, do you? The FBA won't allow it.
We do kind of.
Is there a black market? You have to go and see a guy in a dark alley, and he's like, "Well, okay, I got the pounder here on." No, I wanted the Kinder Surprise.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
No, they make a kind of Kinder Surprise, but it's not nearly as much fun, and it was stupid. So for those of you who aren't aware, a Kinder Surprise was a thin shell of chocolate over a plastic egg that had a pretty cool toy inside. I have to say, I have a couple I can see over on my miniature shelf. But somebody had a shit fit here in the States and decided that a 5-year-old could cram something this big into their mouth and swallow it and choke on it. My Labrador couldn't choke on something that big.
Or a 1.5-year-old could get it up their nose.
Yeah.
Because they managed.
Yeah. But yeah, so we unfortunately no Kinder Surprise here. Surprise, no Kinder eggs. That's the surprise. But
Paul says dumb unsupervised kids happened. Yes, they did. But I mean, dumb unsupervised kids, that's how they grow up, Paul. You have to let them go out and break a leg or something like that. And that's all part of the growth process.
Yeah.
And as long as they survive to adulthood, then they'll grow up. And if they don't survive, well, someone's got to go in the NPC pile.
Just a passerby says, laughs at you in European. Oh, yes, Europe, the land of the metric system. Just don't forget, passerby, there's 2 types of country in this world. Those who use the metric system and those who put men on the moon. Moving right along. But speaking of miniatures, did you see... and if you guys have... I'm going to share this link in the chat. This was great. I cannot imagine this doing anything but being awesome. There is a mini sculptor who has taken arguably one of the more humorous tongue-in-cheek tables from the D&D Dungeon Master's Guide, the AD&D Dungeon Master's Guide, because it did not appear in original, it did not appear in basic. See, this is the kind of thing when I talk about the verve of first edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, you won't find the random harlot encounter table anywhere except in AD&D. Well, I have to hand it to this guy. I'm gonna bring the website up here, and I'm gonna share the link with you guys. He has created a miniature project called A Box of Harlots, inspired by the Encounter subtable. It's on Kickstarter, and for $50, you can have a box with all 12 types of named fils de joie.
I'll have a box of harlots, please.
Naughty ladies of the evening. So I'll throw that link if you want to back that. You feel free. You go right ahead. You let your flag fly.
I can't remember what page it is in the DMG because strangely harlot doesn't appear in the index.
I can always find it just by, like, what page is that on? Pull up the PDF and do a word search for strumpet. One place. It's a one hit for strumpet searching the Dungeon Master's Guide. Did I lose? I think.
Well, if only it were like second edition, then there would have been a whole splat book of strumpets.
Yes. Third edition, and granted, it wasn't Wizards of the Coast, but there was a porn supplement, and I'm sure there were strumpets in there for third edition, the Book of Erotic Fantasy.
God. Yeah.
Now, I think this. I think this this little miniatures project, I think it's silly, but I'm fine with it because if you go looking, even at fairly broadly popular miniature manufacturers, people who are not looking to rile anyone up, the Townsfolk miniature sets, which is available in both plastic and metal from Reaper, has a couple of figures that could fall into these bawdy ladies of the night category. But I mean, I think there's a line when you can say, okay, here's a dancing girl, it's okay. I grab one of these. There's a dancing girl, or okay, here's a slovenly troll, but she's a 5th level thief. She's not just showing off.
Page 192 of them.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you. 192 in the Dungeon Master's Guide. I'm gonna let me see if I can add this here into.
There we go, boys and girls.
Yep.
I'm
going to see if
you can get it. Harlot encounters can be with brazen strumpets or haughty courtesans, thus making it difficult for the party to distinguish each encounter for what it is. I think you know what it is. In fact, the encounter could be with a dancer only prostituting herself as it pleases her, an elderly madam, or even a pimp.
Mm-hmm.
Presumably you know the difference between the pimp and the strumpet. Anyway, in addition to the offering of the usual fare, the harlot is 30% likely to know valuable information, 15% likely to make something up in order to gain a reward, and 20% likely to be or work with a thief. You may find it useful. You may find it useful to use the subtable below to see which sort of harlot encounter takes place. And there's the slovenly troll, the brazen strumpet, the cheap trollop, typical streetwalker, saucy tar, a wanton wench, expensive doxy, haughty courtesan, aged madam, wealthy procuress, sly pimp, and rich panderer.
What is
An expensive doxy? An expensive doxy will resemble a gentlewoman, a haughty courtesan, a noblewoman. The other harlots might be mistaken for good wives, and so forth. Sorry, but
No, I was just going to say, I rolled a 12 on percentile dice, Kyle. What does that get us?
you get a brazen strumpet.
I get a brazen strumpet. All right. Well, there we go.
The chart, if nothing else, is a really great example of the high Gygaxian that Gygax worked to expand the vocabulary of his readers. There were many words that I didn't know when I was 12.
Oh yeah, same.
Like wanton and brazen and stuff.
A doxy, a courtesan.
But the first paragraph is obviously what happened at some point is in one of Gygax's campaigns is that somebody said, I go and I spend my money at a brothel. And he tried to make it more interesting by, okay, the woman in the brothel, she meets men from all across town, from the lowest to the highest social class. Maybe she has some interesting information about what's going on in town or thereabouts. Particularly if there's a group of mercenaries in the area or bandits, things like that. Some of them she might know something about it. Or maybe she just robs you.
Yeah.
Because she's associated with a thief. Or maybe she asks for information, or so you ask her for information, and she says, and then you show her some gold, and she makes something up and sends you off. So he was obviously giving opportunities for role-playing there, presumably without going into the gruesome details. But
Right. And that's, I think a lot of people get their panties in a bunch over that table. But that's like the length and breadth of it. Gary did not launch into a discourse on, here's what's going to happen, and then there's a sub-table for what it cost, and then there's a sub-table for the end results, and so on and et cetera. He just said, hey, look, here's some things that could happen, and I'm going to throw together a bunch of synonyms. And at the end of the day, if that's how your characters want to spend their time and their money, they can. And I mean, if you're talking about like the city of Greyhawk, I would give it a 1% chance that the one that you hook up with, the haughty courtesan is in fact a succubus. Say hello to level loss. Was the night worth it? And
most guys would say, yeah.
Yeah. But that's a fun.
Every guy has the borderline personality disorder chick in his past. It's we've all been there. And we never again. But it's not entirely regret.
Yeah.
Not entirely. Passerby says Critical Role has a thiefling character with a courtesan mother. We need a whole brothel full of different D&D races minis.
Let me see if I can if I can put this in here without. Let's see. There we go. So did that go on to? Yeah, there it is. There it is. So if you check that out, there it is. A box of harlots inspired by the Encounter subtable. There's a cute little video there. I'm not going to play it here. But it's all in good fun and it's all very tongue in cheek. I don't think, it's exposing something ugly about anyone. And if you look at his, if you look at like his stretch goals, I'm sure that the sly pimp is going to get its own subcategory too. Okay. Now I have mentioned this before. That there is, There is a set of miniatures that is prized by a good many collectors of miniatures. I would walk away from a table where the DM broke these things out. It's called the Slave Auction. It was sculpted by Dennis Mize. For one, look, I'm sorry if you're a fan of it or if you think that all old miniatures are superior to new miniatures. They're not well sculpted. Okay. With all respect to Dennis Mize and his sculpting ability, later in life, he did make some beautiful pieces for Reaper, for Ralpartha. They're not well sculpted. Two, whereas you could take the Harlot table minis and, again, proxy them in for conceivably many different roles, the Slave Auction is pretty much a box in miniature of about 40 different ways for women to be degraded. And I mean that in a very negative sense. If I showed up at a game and the DM, I've said this time and again, but I will say it, and the DM said, okay, you're in the capital of Evil Kingdom, and you're walking through the streets and you hear the sounds of an auction. Okay, all right, we hear the sounds of an auction. And he's like, just a minute, I got minis for this. And he starts taking out these lovingly painted Slave Auction minis. I'd say, you know what? I've got a thing I got to go do, guy. I'm sorry. I know I should have managed my time better and gather up my shit and then get out of there. And likewise, I think things like the Book of Erotic Fantasy, I'm not being a pearl clutcher about it. I'm not going to say that shouldn't be published. What you do is your own business. I just think there is a vast difference between a book that basically details in distressingly fine detail sexual activities in your tabletop game, and a set of miniatures that is, quite frankly, brutally misogynistic, and then a set of 12 minis which are clothed women in suggestive poses. And trust me, if you go look out at cheesecake minis out there that many miniature companies have as a part of the main line of what they sell.
Well, it's a bit like the difference between the bang bus and burlesque.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just the nasty stuff, and then there's just people having fun.
Exactly. Yeah, so, thank you. Like, you go to the Ren Fair and there's a bawdy lady, she's got a corset on and she's telling randy medieval jokes to guys passing with their girlfriends and that sort of thing, and a strip club up the highway. They're two completely different worlds. Yeah. And who knows, maybe she works at the place. So yeah, this is a thing that happened, and in the time we've been talking about it, I don't know what you guys have been up to out there in the audience, but it was at $1,900. And since I put this up, it's gone up to $2,015. So I don't know if some of our audience was like, hell yeah. I know Volcano God was like, I'm going to back this.
Yeah, so badass, I'll back it on principle alone. I don't even want the minis, nor do I believe they'll deliver. Back it.
Let's see. Volcano for AC/DC. She's got the clap.
She's got the jack. Her ace was wild.
Yeah.
Now that I'm using Star Wars Lego for my D&D, I think I need 20 slave leaders for this activity.
But will Bill walk away from my table?
I'm offended by your Lego.
Yeah, your Legos offend. Only if you start building them into a body horror giant unified slave Leia Lego. You've gone
50
from
Shades of Lego.
50 Shades of Lego. Damien says, reminds me of the Skyrim Immersive Wenches mod. It added more barmaids to the game with a bonus that they also had character classes if you wanted hirelings. Interesting. Volcano says, I keep trying to smash a super chat, but you don't have one. No, we don't have a super chat. So one of the nice advantages of getting 1,000 subs on the YouTube channel for us is that thing gives us, that then allows me to apply for monetization. And if YouTube says yes, then I can put super chats on. That's not why I just picked 1,000 subs as a nice round number, but without the monetization, I can still, and Kyle can still, because he's an admin on the channel, can still like put up pictures in discussions. We can have more community on YouTube. Put up pictures, put up polls, engage with you guys a little bit better. And 1,000's just a nice round number. But when I get 1,000, and I think it's 4,000 hours of engagement. See, I'm just saying I want 1,000 subs before we do the mini convention. That's not it. But let me tell you, if you want to contribute to the channel, if you want to donate to the channel,
4,000 hours of engagement, is that like 4,000 hours of broadcasting or what?
That's like if altogether people watch 4,000 hours of your videos.
Oh, okay.
So like if you
had 100 hours of videos and 40 people had watched it, then okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
But if you want to, and I thought about doing Patreon. I don't know how to set up Patreon. I mean, I know how to do it from the standpoint of go there and do these things, but like, I don't know what to give you guys in Patreon. Cause like I do videos all week long and Kyle is here for part of them and stuff. So I don't know what extra I could just,
if you unlock the higher tier, we talk politics.
Kyle, I need things to make them want to stay.
Maybe if you unlock the higher tier, we promise not to talk about politics.
I think that's the better bet. Yeah, the highest tier gets you a video where we don't talk about the Australian Army. We don't talk about anything except Dungeons and Dragons and other role-playing games. But if you want to contribute to the channel,
who was the guy who got traumatized by when we mentioned tax assistance?
Oh, I care. That may have been passerby. I don't know. Or no. I think that was Paul Bacleda.
All right. Sorry, Paul. We did come around to gaming in the end.
We
were
did.
Just saying that humans tend to make systems excessively complex.
We did. But anyway, if you want to contribute to the channel. Look, I'm not rattling the tin cup. I'm just saying because people have asked me this before. Like, I want to donate money to help fund the live streams, as it were. You can PayPal. You can PayPal me at bsylvia@gmail.com. And yes, now that I have a co-host, it will get shared. I will not be a greedy Gus about it. Kyle is very much a part of this.
You can use it on postage on that T2K package.
I know, yeah, right. Your Con-Am hat and your T2K package and stuff. So if you want to donate anything to the show monetarily, right now it's PayPal. When I get to the level of engagement where I can turn on super chats and you can kick $5 in or $10 in or whatever you want to do, you can do that. I follow a YouTuber, which this is so narrow and so specific. It's like, I would completely get if you guys are just like, that doesn't sound like anything I would ever want to do. But the guy, I believe he's from Holland. His YouTube handle is Decino, and he plays Doom and Doom mods and talks about the code of Doom, like how Doom works internally. And he has done live streams before, and One day somebody was watching one of his live streams as he was playing this massive Doom map. And I saw a super chat. I threw $5 to him. It's entertainment, you know? But somebody I saw, they donated 666 of a currency. And I was like, oh my God. And then I noticed it was it was like UR or something like that. Well, it turns out to have been like Ukrainian rubles. It's the equivalent of like $11.
Yeah, but that's probably a month's wages there.
Exactly. So I thought it was pretty decent.
People toss it out. I was watching, so that the armor one that I was watching, there's a guy called Karma Kut, Karma and then KUT, one word, Karma Kut, and he has like 50,000 subscribers and everything, and guys will subscribe and they'll pay for so many months or years of subscription as well. And he has a whole website that people go to, and if you buy this game or buy this PC or whatever, because like he's got in his little descriptive chat, oh, you want to play the game that I'm playing? Well, this is the sort of PC you need if you don't have it already. And there's some site that they do like builds or whatever, and here's your starting build, here's your top quality build, and I get a slice of that if you choose to do so. There's subscription, like some guy chucked down a few $100 for like 4 years subscription or something. I still want to be watching your videos in 4 years.
Yeah.
So there's some amazingly generous people out there, and that they want to hear you keep talking shit forever. Volcano God asked something that probably shouldn't be talked about. He said, "Is Kyle your friend that interviewed McCracken?"
Yes, he is. Your soul will be lacking when you interview McCracken.
Cinnabar. Yes. So we've talked about it before. I can't remember who was watching then or if they remember it. But so I was going to Seattle for a strength training seminar, starting strength, Mark Ripto. And I was going up to Seattle for that. I've never been up there before. I did a semester on exchange when I was 15, 16, at Hamilton Northwestern in Indiana. But apart from that, I hadn't really been to the US. So anyway, went up to, and I was telling Bill, I'm going to go up to Seattle. This was back in 2012. Oh, here's Hickington. Here's Hickey. He's on. Hi, Hickey. He's from Ireland.
Hey,
He plays Dace Ed with us. And me and PJ call him Porter Hickey because he's the one who wants to build up the base and build a car and everything. And you've got to run all over the bloody map to pick up the pieces and put the damn thing together and that. But he loves all that building stuff. He's not that keen on shooting. Or other players anyway. I assume he does that in other games. Gets his aggression out that way. Hey, Hickey. Anyway, so there I was, 2012, going to Seattle, and Bill said, you should go and see Raven C.S. McCracken, author of World of Cinnabar. World of Cinnabar is one of the most insane games out there.
it is the living.
You could be a raccoon with a bazooka.
If you could condense chaotic neutral into a role-playing game, it's World of Cinnabar.
Yes. And I would have brought my copy from inside if I'd known we were going to talk about it. Anyway, you could just Google image search World of Cinnabar, and you'll come up with raccoon with a bazooka and wizards firing laser beams from their fingers on a spaceship or something. I don't know. So I contacted Raven and said, come to Seattle, it would be great to meet up. And I met with him, and he is a great guy. He is completely insane, but he is a great guy. The best way to describe it, I think, is adolescent enthusiasm for gaming and for life in general. That unself-conscious adolescent enthusiasm that many of us had as adolescents. that led Bill to being, what were you, 12 years old or something like that, writing up a module and sending it off to TSR. Something that people won't do when they're 30 or they're 50 or whatever. But when they're 12 or 14, you know, they're like, oh, yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, let's do this. That, I think it's good to keep a bit of that adolescent enthusiasm. It makes gaming a lot more fun, where you just jump into it and you don't care if it's a bit stupid or if it doesn't make much sense. You're not there picking it apart. You know, you see those guys on discussion forums and they're picking apart games, the bitter non-gamer guys, compared to the ones who just jump in and they have fun and they fuck up and they die and everything. They don't care. They just come in and they have fun.
Yep.
I think it's good to keep a bit of that. And Raven certainly did. You know, when he contacted me, this was 2012, so it was before people were doing a lot of, at least in Australia, people were doing a lot of video calling and stuff like that. So I described myself and said where I'd be. And he said, I'm 50 years old with a mohawk.
And he was.
And he was. And so I walked into the Starbucks I don't know, there's some central square in a shopping centre or whatever in the middle of Seattle. Walked into the Starbucks there and yeah, there was this 50-year-old guy in a leather jacket with a mohawk. And he, let's see if I can find it. Oh no, too much of a hassle. Send a picture out another time. He was playtesting Cinnabar 2 that time. And he had this big manuscript, this big wad of paper. He slapped it down on the table and said, "This is the simplest system ever." I looked at the big pile of paper pages. Okay.
Things as big as the Miami phone book, folks.
Yeah. And we went through it and we did an example combat between two guys. And then I realized that in this example combat, we were doing like 2 hit points of damage to each other or something like that. And you had 100 or 200 hit points. And I could see, so after 10 or 12 rounds, I could see it was going to take a long time to resolve. And so I changed the topic and got him talking about some other gaming stuff. But he talked about the development of his rules. And as an example of how deep you can go down the rabbit hole of rules complexity. So he'd made made the surprise rules. And then he said, when he's playtesting with his mates, and we need sleep surprise. Because, you know, you fall asleep on watch or something, or there's a guy on watch and there's the other guys asleep and then the orcs come or whatever. Okay. You know, how quickly do you wake up from, you know, so you had the sleep surprise rules. You know, normal people would just say, I don't know, take 1 off your D6 when you roll for it or something like that.
Yeah.
But no, he had a whole chart for sleep surprise rules that he showed me in his draft. And then he said it was more complex than this before. And then kind of the alarmed eyes.
The mind boggles.
Yeah. And he had said, maybe we need different rules for sleep surprise based on what sleep phase you're in, whether you're in light sleep, REM sleep, or deep sleep. REM sleep. And then one of his players said, you know, REM sleep surprise rules, you know, you've gone too far, Raven. And he was like, oh, yeah, okay then.
I'm just astounded that somebody was able to convince Raven C.S. McCracken that he'd gone too far.
Well, I think McCracken is the same as just about everyone. You know, when you're writing things on the internet or, you know, in a printed work, you sound pretty dogmatic. You know, I mean,
Yep.
when you look at a book this size, it looks pretty dogmatic. This is the way you're going to play, or else kind of thing. And then you meet them in person, and most people are a bit more accommodating.
Yep.
And that of course is one of the reasons that we people don't like it when we talk politics, because when people do their furious typing on Reddit or whatever, everyone's super dogmatic. This is the way it's got to be. Death to my opponents, But then when you get people in person, most people are a bit more compromising and accommodating. And it's exactly the same with game rules and game systems. Because in the end, McCracken, like the rest of us, just wanted to have fun. Now, he told me a lot of stories. I'm sure some of them might be true. But it didn't matter anyway because they were entertaining. He told me that he had basically come up with the idea for Cinnabar when he was, as I remember it, I don't claim to remember perfectly, it's almost 10 years ago now. God. Oh. Anyway, he said that he was down in Florida playing a game with Gygax as the GM and basically said, why can't I be a wizard with a sword? And Gygax said, well, you just can't. That's what it is. And Raven cracked the shits and basically Gygax said, look, if you want a system where you can be a wizard with a sword, you should go and make that system. And so McCracken did. You could be a raccoon with a bazooka, or a wizard with a sword, or a bit flying there with laser beams coming out of its eyes.
Yes.
You could do that. So he made his own system.
A flying clam that can breathe fire. If you want that, you've got it.
Yeah. He said that, what was it? The GURPS was basically a rip-off of Cinnabar. Because he said, GURPS was role-playing done right because it was power gaming. He said, true role-playing is power gaming, having the super powerful character. Yeah, he was just basically nuts, but in a great and entertaining way. And he was very generous with his time as well. We spent the day together. He showed me around town. We went to Pike Place and had a nice salmon lunch. And it's for those who haven't been, as I recall it anyway, so there's Seattle, and then there's a sort of a big seawall. And essentially into the seawall, they've built this series of shops and restaurants and things. And you go down through there. And there was a game store in there that he took me into. And it had all the usual run of stuff, the comics and the minis and the regular games and the role-playing games and everything. Yeah, there was this game store. It was a great place. And they knew McCracken, of course. And it was funny because when I went there again, I couldn't find the game store. And,
spooky.
Yeah, I think it was just because it's this strange kind of network of tunnels and that, and you have to get to know the place and that. But yeah, it was strange that I couldn't find the game store. I wasn't able to direct other people to it when they visited Seattle many years later. But it existed, damn it, it existed. Yeah, and he knew all the other crazy people around town. There was this guy sitting there with a piano which had basically all this stuff about the US Constitution. He was some sort of hardcore libertarian and going, I think he was a sovereign citizen with a piano on the street.
I am not playing a piano on the street. I am conducting a piano across the land as a free man.
I don't know. It was some sort of libertarian type. And then there was a guy in a kilt who worked at the FedEx, who was making some sort of fantasy movie, like medieval fantasy, like D&D. Not D&D, but medieval fantasy movie out in the woods around Seattle. I wish I remember his name. I never found out if it ever got completed or anything. But yeah, he just knew everyone around town. He was a friendly guy. He knew everyone and talked to everyone. And he was completely insane, but in an entertaining way. As I said, adolescent enthusiasm. I think that's what I got from it. Keep that up.
There's a saying, I think, that's 100% true, and Raven is probably the prime example of it. I am certainly trying to apply this to my life a little bit. And I mean that sincerely. This is not tongue in cheek, but the saying is, we don't stop playing because we grow old. We grow old because we stop playing.
Hmm.
And you talk about being permanently in the 12-year-old feedback loop, and if that's where Raven is, and if that's where he's happy, and if he's not growing old because he's not stopping playing, then good for him. You know, good for him.
He's a man who's chosen to live his life in a certain way, writing games. He owned a bar and played in this band that played at the bar. I guess if you own your own nightclub, then your band can always be booked.
Raven is an NPC in a cyberpunk game. He's like the GM's favorite NPC in a cyberpunk game.
Yep. Yeah.
I have a brief story about Seattle and game stores, and I have to share this because it was in 1994, and God, I can't believe that was a while back. But in 1994, I went and I spent almost 3 weeks in Seattle, hanging around with my dear friend Jeff Johnson, who I've stayed in contact with over the years. I met him here in Florida. When Desert Storm happened a couple of years after I met him, or the year after I met him, or when it went down, like, he signed up. Like, he basically was at the point where he would say, hey, I know you're going to deploy me. I would prefer to be deployed to Saudi Arabia or to Iraq or to Kuwait. So they put him in a hospital in Washington State, because the idea was that because of his profession with viral pathology and all, was that they would be receiving tens of thousands of casualties from Iraqi biowarfare, which of course never materialized. Thank God for that. But I went up and I spent, he fell in love with the Northwest, resigned his commission, and just lived out there. And he invited me up in 94. He's like, hey, come up here. So I moved up to, I visited him up there, and it's a beautiful part of the United States, and we had a lot of fun. And I remember taking a day and going down Broadway, and I walked into a game store, and it was right around Halloween, and what we called danger hair back then was just the extremely rare individual who would dye their hair a certain color. And I didn't really take any notice of it because it was Halloween. But there was a young lady in there, a lovely young woman, very nice, very polite, who had fitted ceramic vampire fangs. And I know they were that because she was about to tuck into her breakfast. Her nails were this shade of cerulean blue. They were the same shade as the bagel she was about to eat, and that was the same shade blue that was in her hair. It was the trippiest thing I had seen on a personal level, like person to person, while I was in Seattle at that point. I was like, wow. I didn't say anything about it, but I'm rocking around this game store to see if there's any RPG stuff that jumps out at me, and there she is, with a bagel that is the same color as her fingernails and the same color as her hair. And I wouldn't doubt for a minute if she knew Raven C.F. McCracken.
Well, we can see why Cyberpunk came out of Seattle.
Yes. So, yeah, interesting times. There was something else I was going to mention. Something... Oh, I know what this is. Let's end on a low, angry note, because we've been having a lot of fun tonight. So, and I shouldn't say like a low, angry note, because honestly, when it comes to Wizards of the Coast and their application of Dungeons and Dragons, fuck them. They released an adventure book. See, they don't do modules anymore. Modules don't sell. I mean, except for the fact that they sell like fucking hotcakes. I think Gary said that the sales figures for the first print run, the pastel cover of Tomb of Horrors, was like 250,000 copies. Now you figure $4.99 a copy. That's 1.25 million gross on those. Find me a game company today that would turn their nose up at 1.25 million gross. Even if net's only around a $500,000 when the dust settles. But they've released a game book, and one of the bad guys is named, he's like the Wizard Thaco. Like that's his name, is spelled Thaco, Thaco. Oh boy, they sure gave it to us mean old grognards. Boy, you sure zinged me. I'm gonna go cry into my copy of original Dungeons and Dragons now.
I'm sure I've encountered a player who had a fighter called Thaco. I'm sure I don't know, it might be just fabricated memory, but I'm sure I've encountered it. At some point somebody wrote that down.
Here's the thing. IR says, oh, I thought you were going to talk about GW. No, GW deserves their own rants, but not right now. A trigger warning bagel. Passerby says a trigger warning bagel. Volcano God, I think that this was a few minutes ago. This is in reference to your Raven story. He said it was a lovely story, and thank you for telling it.
My pleasure.
But when people are like, ooh, I don't want to play AD&D, Thaco. I'm like, hold up. So now you guys are like getting some actual game content out of my stream, out of the Wastrel Wednesday stream. Don't get used to it. 2-hit armor class 0 is not a thing in first edition AD&D. It is one entry in the monster index in the Dungeon Master's Guide that is useful for the DM to use as a baseline if he's flipping his Dungeon Master's Guide on the side to quickly look at the stats of a monster. It does not take into account repeating 20s, and it is not intended for characters to use. 2-hit armor class 0 has nada to do with first edition AD&D. So if you come to me and you're like, I'm going to crush him by referencing Thaco, first of all, it's THAC0. Second of all, no, you're not. So just
I don't get the drama over it. I don't really see why anyone would be emotional about it, that they love it or hate it. It's just a little game mechanic. It's like being emotional that a weapon does 1d8 instead of 1d6 or something. It's like, and emotional about saving throws. I don't get it at all.
I'm not. I'm not seething and coping over it over here. I'm just like, it doesn't. It's like one passing mention in the Dungeon Master's Guide. You can't come to me with like, I'd play in your first edition game, Bill, but Thaco. Come on, dude. We don't use it's not used. Relax. Maybe show me on the doll where second edition AD&D touched you, but it's not in first edition. It's not a first edition thing. It's not an issue, guys. If Wizards thinks that they zinged the grogs, well, good for you. Break your arm patting yourselves on the back.
I just don't get the emotion over it. I mean, there's far more things like the snacks that people bring.
Yeah, exactly. The guy that shows up with kale, I'm more angry at him than I am someone that keeps cracking on about Thaco.
No, the worst wasn't kale.
I thought you told me it was kale. I thought you told me somebody showed up with like a kale dip or something.
Well, there were a couple of gamers who they went on a health food kick, and they decided to show up with healthy food. The game group imploded not long after. I don't think healthy food works well in game groups. I think you need junk, or food which might be healthy, but it's somewhat indulgent. Something like like chips and dips or whatever. That it's not too bad health wise, but it's fairly indulgent as well. Or there was one. There was one thread on the RPG site once, I think, like talking about snacks, and one guy had a fucking fondue set for his players.
Now that works. You got burnt. You got oil because you know oil in D&D, and then you got stabby things. I'm loving it.
Yeah, that's a fondue set. So that's pretty hardcore. But no, the snack that scarred me emotionally, and I didn't even taste it. When we played at Good Games in the City, it was on like the third floor, and the building had all this Korean, like there was a Korean migration service and Korean teaching English or something, and then on the ground floor there was a Korean grocery store, and then one of the in between floors there was the game club. Which I don't think I ever saw a Korean at. But so there was a Korean grocery store, and Aaron used to get snacks from that grocery store down there. So, and Asian snacks are different to Western snacks. They have different things, like the sweet thing of the what's it called, Japanese mochi or something, the red bean paste.
Yeah.
That appears in all those. And it's a different taste if you're not used to it. Some people love it, and some dislike it, and some just haven't tried it.
I like wasabi peanuts. Wasabi peanuts are good.
So there's all that sort of stuff as well. And he would just grab random things just to try them. But one of them, and it was all in Korean, so we didn't know what the fuck was in it. It's all in Korean languages. And there was one that basically looked like Twisties or Cheetos, as you call them. The little sort of cheese.
Yeah, puffed corn.
Extruded cheese thing or whatever. Yeah, puffed corn, whatever, with the cheesy flavour. But it was brown. So what it looked like was something that you didn't actually want to eat. I refused to even take it. It's like, it's not bad, but it was probably the least popular snack at that game table ever. I think one or two of the other players might have tried it, but he ate about half the pack and then stopped. So I don't think it was one of those things where it looks awful but tastes great or whatever, because he didn't scarf it all down. The way he might have, with a bag of just salt and vinegar chips or something.
Yeah.
But so I was emotionally scarred by the sight of that on my game table. I don't even remember where we were playing, Traveller or D&D or something else, or if I was GMing or playing. I don't even remember. I just emotionally scarred by the brown Korean Cheetos.
Yeah.
That's much more important than whether you have Tharko or you use a D6 or a D12 or whatever. That's the snacks.
Exactly.
People snacks, yeah. And if it wasn't my dear friend, if it had been a new player, I wouldn't have invited him to the game session again.
And who could blame you, really? I mean, I suppose an apology email, if it had been forthcoming from that new player, and a promise to never do so again, might have gotten him back in a probationary sense, providing he showed up, with a stack of dominoes or something like that. I mean, pizza boxes, not the little playing things. But anyway, we'll go out on a high note talking about snacks instead of THACO. Once again, Kyle Schuant elevating the level of our discourse to a much higher altitude, and we love you for it.
By talking about brown Cheetos.
Thank you. You almost made me spew on camera by talking about brown Cheetos, which sounds like an aphorism for something. Oh my God, I've got the brown Cheetos. Woo. Anyhow, so I think we're just about coming to the end of it. We've chewed all the flavor out of this stick today. Let's see. We'll go through some chats, make sure we're not missing anybody, because you guys have been setting the conversation on fire tonight, and I love it. Let's see. A trigger warning bagel. No, again, she seemed like a very nice person. Really, really nice person, but now we're delving into the book that I told you I didn't want to talk about. Kale does suck. The best way to prepare kale is with a lot of coconut oil so you can slide it straight into the garbage out of the pan. Thaco the Clown. Thank you, Volcano God. Thaco the Clown. They just can't let it go. Korean street food is delicious. Now, Korean cooked food, I've been to a Korean restaurant once here, and I liked what I had. And if you ever look up some good recipes for bibimbap, which is kind of basically skillet fried leftovers, it sounds delicious. I'm going to try that one day.
Here in Melbourne, big thing in the last couple of years, there's been Korean chicken and beer. Apparently, that's a big thing for them. Fried chicken and beer.
Oh yeah.
And when I watched, there was a Netflix teleseries. A sort of there was a kind of the Korean stuntman who ended up going off on spy adventures and stuff. Anyway, and they were constantly having chicken and beer constantly. So it must, it must be a thing there.
Well, dude, if we can get him enjoying biscuits and watermelon and other stuff, you could just move him to the southern United States. It works for me. Let the North Koreans have that cold, rocky peninsula. You guys move to Florida, vote Republican. I don't care. Anyway, Thaco the Clown versus Homie the Clown. Who wins? Homie in a TKO in 1 round. Passerby says, kale the Dutch way, mashed potatoes with kale, lots of gravy and a big sausage. Healthy but not healthy. I might eat that if you could hold the kale. No, I would eat that if you held the kale. Some Korean street food vids on YouTube. That egg bread thing looks... Well, I'll check that out.
Bangers and mashed with cut. I once upset Bill a little bit. My character in one of his campaigns had men-at-arms, and all I fed them was ale and sausages.
Ale and sausages. The most constipated mercenary band in all the land. And with that toilet humor, guys, I think that's where we're going to call it for the evening. Thank you all for stopping by. Big round of applause for our co-host Kyle. It's always, I wish you could be here for like every live stream, but I understand that you don't want to wake up at 4 a.m. to do them.
No, I'm not that dedicated to
not quite. I mean, if the shoe was on the other foot and you said, hey Bill, I want to do the live streams at night, my time, so you stay up till 3 a.m, I'd be like, no. So I get it. Yeah, but it is good to have you here, and we'll see you next week. You're going to be back. So that's always a lot of fun. Guys, thank you all. Have an absolutely fantastic evening. It's been a great live stream. I'll be back tomorrow, and those of you who've been holding your breath, sitting on pins and needles, waiting on tenterhooks to find out what happened in Monday night's AD&D game, I will tell you the story then, and we'll have a final time. Until then, be well, take care of each other, and play some first edition AD&D. Peace.